Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandab, 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 namandab. Please join me in chanting Sambujo. Then we'll read together the three treasures and chant the sutra Sambutsuge. three treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear it. If we do not realize the truth in this life, when will it be realized? Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we absorb ourselves in the principle of the way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves the supreme will. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we be submerged in the depths of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we live in harmony in the great assembly as disciples of Buddha and be freed from all hindrances, becoming units of true accord in the life of harmony in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, 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 Namanda. Sambutsuge. 조세무린 쇼각다이온 거르지보 가이몬쇼진 산마이지에 이토금으려 슈쇼개우진타이센는 쇼분호가이근진진노 그호다이타이 무묘요금은 세손요문 인노시시 인토금으려 그근호다이 지혜진묘 고묘위소 신소다이센 간가사분사이쇼호요 가도쇼지 미후게단 부세쇼위 가이닌쇼진 요세산마이 지혜이조 고토 태소급은 풋교시간 이사이 크크 이사다얌 개시읍은 약센노그만 묘료다이쇼 준요고자 그요이사이 시토쇼분 분요그도 겐쇼후야그히뇨고자 쇼분 개가이 무흑하게 무심 셋노 고묘시쇼 헨지시코 요세쇼진 이진남료 료가사분 고그도 다이지고슈기묘 도조초셋 고그뇨나yon 니무도소가 도아이민 도 実法来生心熱症状意図が国経絡安穏公文神妙世が心症本願の日力少々欲実法生存知恵無下上量子孫知が心行計量心死五足読中画行精進臨終風景ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブがんにしくどく平等性祭道本も大心往生ナモアミダ仏ナモアミダ仏ナモアミダ仏ナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダナマンダ仏Good morning. Thank you all for coming this morning. I'd like to start the next portion of our service with my Dharma message. Give me just a moment and I will share my screen so you can see the slideshow that I've put together. There we go. So please join me in Gassho. I'd like to share the words of Pure Land Master Dao Cho. I've collected true words so that they may help others practice the way for birth. For my wish is that those who have attained birth may lead those who come after them, and those who aspire for birth may follow their predecessors, thus following one after another endlessly and uninterruptedly until the boundless sea of birth and death is exhausted. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. This glosandai comes from Dao Cho's Anlei Chi, or collection of passages on the land of peace and bliss, and is also quoted by our founder Shinran. Dao Cho lived from 562 to 645 of the Common Era, and he lived in China at a time when Buddhism was persecuted in the region. During his lifetime, more than 1 million monks and nuns were laicized, which meant that they lost their very livelihoods. It is also a time plagued by war, famine, and disease, and yet Dao Cho found great hope in the Pure Land Nembutsu teachings. I think if we look back on the lives of Shinran and Honen in Japan, the founders of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, they too lived in times of political upheaval war, natural disasters, and personal persecution by the government, which included exile and execution for some of Honen's followers. Rather than giving up or accepting their fates in persecution, they found hope and new life in the simplicity and accessibility of the Pure Land teachings, of saying the name of Buddha. All this led them to become great teachers, without whom we wouldn't be here today. Considering these great teachers, their lives and their words, I wonder, what can we do in times of trouble today as Buddhists? How can our teachings sustain us the way they did our teachers? We come to temple, or these days we participate in online services for a few hours out of the week. But what about the rest of our lives? What's our personal practice look like? Is it simply chanting and nembutsu, offering incense and doing oshoko? What about outside of the temple and outside of our religious community though? What do we do at work, at school, at the gym or the grocery store, or when we're stuck at home with nowhere to go? I'm not suggesting that we be perfect, rather a more thoughtful view of the big picture of our lives and what we do to support that view in life. On this slide, I have some questions posed by the influential theologian and spiritual caregiver, James Fowler, whose work we considered in my Buddhist chaplaincy classes at the Institute of Buddhist Studies. These questions all revolve around the universal concept of spirituality that can be useful in providing spiritual care in interfaith or no-faith contexts. But I think about our own shared Nembutsu path as Shin Buddhists, and how these questions might be guiding us through our lives. They can help us to navigate the question in times of crisis, of joy, the mundanity of everyday existence. How do we direct our lives as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists? Fowler has stated that these questions, quote, help us to get in touch with the dynamic pattern processes by which we live a meaningful life. And I'd like to offer my own personal reflections on these questions as I think about them in my own life. The first one is, what are you spending and being spent for? What commands and receives your best time and your best energy? What do we spend our time and our energies on? What's considered a waste of time and energy for us? And what feels right, rewarding, and fulfilling? In either 2014 or 2015, I can't remember exactly, I met a man named James, when volunteering with the Berkeley Buddhist Temple at Project Homeless Connect in San Francisco. I was working as a guide in the Bill Graham Auditorium to help participants, unhoused folks, find services that they needed. While I was there, I met a lot of wonderful people, especially James. And we spent almost an hour together during the whole 5-hour period. He told me that he'd studied Buddhism in Japan, China, and Korea for several years. And when he asked me what I do, I told him that I was a manager at a retail store in San Francisco. But then he clarified and asked, no, what do you do here? And so I told him that I was volunteering as a guide to help people find what they needed in this big building filled with booths. I'll never forget that moment because James responded to me, quote, you know, that's what the Buddha did. I had to leave for a few minutes after he told me this because I needed to go cry and collect myself. Because I realized at that time that all the effort and energy that I'd spent on corporate retail was unfulfilling. And what I really wanted to do was follow in the footsteps of Buddha and so many of his followers. The Sangha had inspired me to try to be a better person. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of the teachers throughout the centuries, down to Shinran and our own ministers here in the BCA. There was a major shift in my own outlook on life, and I knew I needed to realign my path to be more in line with those aspirations. Fowler's second question is, what causes, dreams, goals, or institutions are you pouring your life out for? What are we investing our lives in? When I was in school at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, sometimes it felt like I was just trying to get through and do my chores. It was tiring work that I needed to get done in order to get to the next step in my life. But I had to come back to the deeper process of learning and how that was changing me. I remember during my first semester at the school, I was frustrated by Buddhist concepts, and the whole worldview was so different from how I'd been living my own life, and all the terminology in Sanskrit, Chinese, and Japanese, and other languages that was really difficult for me to remember. I was academically trained as a scientist in geology, so everything felt super foreign to me. At the time, I was recovering from major knee surgery and was on the bus to see my physical therapist. On the bus, I was reading the book, The Heart of the Shin Buddhist Path by Takamaro Shigaraki. And on the front of the book, there's an image of Amida Buddha. While I was reading on the bus, an interesting looking guy noticed me while he was mumbling to himself. This person on the bus commented on the image of Buddha on my book and the matching Amida tattoo that I have on my arm. He said, "I like your tattoo. You must be a holy man." I giggled a little bit to myself, and I was slightly annoyed because my knee hurt, I was behind on my homework, and I felt pessimistic about how physical therapy was about to go. But I just chuckled and told him that I doubted about being a holy man. He grinned real big and said, "I think you are. See, you're reading that book." And since the bus guy seemed nice, I decided to put away my book and talk to him. And we shared stories and connected over our knee injuries. He told me that he'd hurt his knee during the Vietnam War and told me that it never fully healed, so he had a hard time getting around. After a few minutes, I told him we were almost to my stop, and so he took off a necklace that he was wearing and handed it to me. He said that it was really special and made of real crystals. I reluctantly took the necklace and thanked him as I got off the bus. Once again, I had to sit down and cry a little as I collected my thoughts. That's right, I cry a lot because I'm an emotional person. You see, this man recognized in me what I had initially discarded in him, our shared sacredness, a sense of holiness. Maybe we could call that our Buddha nature. This experience reminded me of why I was in school and my desire to serve my community and my Sangha. Fowler's next question is, as you live your life, what power or powers do you fear or dread? What powers do you rely on and trust? For me, I dread the nasty bits of humanity that cause great anguish, the violence of discrimination, racism, hatred, and oppression. These are powerful forces, but powerful too are the forces of compassion, kindness, and love. We each hold the potential to enact all these forces, and I hope that we choose carefully what we rely on and how we live our lives. Fowler's next question is, to what or whom are you committed in life and in death? For me, I have to say that I'm dedicated to those who feel the pain of suffering. That's all of us, but especially those who are oppressed, those whose voices are drowned out by violence, marginalization, and hatred. I don't know what will happen when I die, and this makes me even more committed to those who I share my life with. His next question is, with whom or what groups do you share your most sacred and private hopes for your life and for the lives of those you love? I share my hopes and my dreams with my loved ones, my Sangha, and I hope to embrace the primal vow as my own, that all beings may live lives of fulfillment, joy, and equality. Sometimes it's hard for me to know where I fit out in that role. It's hard to know what to do because we're constantly blinded by our own selfish interests. But I always ask myself the question, what am I doing right now? Is it helpful just for me, or is it helpful for a greater number of people? Fowler's last question is, what are your most sacred hopes, those most compelling goals and purposes in your life? I think that this one's probably the most difficult question to think about because those things can constantly be changing. We may have a lot of different hopes and dreams, things that propel us forward in life, and those priorities may change from time to time. But generally speaking, I'd like to think that my hope is that in every day and in every moment, I can bear witness to people's lives and encourage them so that they can live in freedom and happiness, and to share that sense of liberation and joy with others. For myself, as I read through and answers the questions, I see the importance of living a life with intent. And as I consider these questions, and hopefully when you consider these questions, we find a sense of renewal of our own aspirations in life. I can look back on times of both great joy and terrible anguish with a deeper appreciation for how they eventually led me to where I am today. However, during times of darkness and pain and isolation, or even in my own boredom, sometimes I lose sight of these aspirations. Just as Tao Cho aspired to end the suffering of all beings, so too did Honen and Shinran and countless other brave and compassionate teachers through the ages. They likely had times of failure, of darkness and of frustration, but they held true to their wish, their prayer, to teach others in order to help them find the cure to suffering. I'm no better than anyone else, limited by my karma, and I'm doing my best to understand that these causes and conditions lead to constraints in my own life. But I still hold the aspiration in my heart to always guide and allow others to guide me. There's much darkness and frustration and confusion within myself and the world around me. However, my wish centers and guides me back to my aspirations. I'd like to end my Dharma message today with some words from our founder, Shinran. If you'll please join me in Gassho. My eyes being hindered by blind passions, I cannot perceive the light that grasps me. Yet the great compassion, without tiring, illumines me always. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, 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 namanda. So that'll be the end of our service today. I'd like to thank the Buddhist Temple of Marin for all their support. Thank you to everyone who came to the service today. And if you're watching later on YouTube, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to end the recording so we can chat for a few minutes.